Today we're looking at the woman caught in adultery as captured in John chapter 8 verses 1 through 11. But before we dig in, does the story even belong in the New Testament? Many of you may already know this, some of you may not, but the story of the woman caught in adultery doesn't appear in the manuscript evidence until around the 5th century. So we have a good 350 to 450 years after the writing of John's Gospel before this story appears. And in some of its early appearances, it's not even in John's Gospel, it's in Luke's Gospel. It doesn't gain widespread text traffic until around the 11th or 12th centuries. And the early church fathers in both the Eastern and Western traditions make no mention of this story. So how did it get in there? Well, apparently it was a popular enough story being told by person to person that it sort of became a part of the mental story of Jesus, and it eventually found its way into the manuscripts. What other evidence is there that it doesn't belong apart from it not being in the earliest manuscripts? Well, if you look at John's Gospel, this story clearly interrupts the flow of events and throws this sort of non sequitur into the mix, starting at chapter 7, verse 53, which is an add-on that breaks up the flow, that sends everybody home to their houses and Jesus off to the Mount of Olives. And also some of the other things are, when you simply read through it, through John's Gospel, there's a shift in the tone, there's a shift in the style of writing. Not to mention, there are 13 words found in verses 1 through 11 of chapter 8 that occur nowhere else in John. So he has a vocabulary change. He has a style change. It interrupts the flow of the story. It's pretty clear that this was added on later and was not written by the person who wrote the Gospel of John as we know it. So why look at it at all? Well, it's a fascinating little story. It's written in Koine, and this is in fact Koine Corner, where we look at things in Koine. And it was such an important part of the oral tradition that people probably felt like something was wrong in the fact that it wasn't written down somewhere. Whether or not it should be in the canon, I leave up to you. I leave that up to others. It doesn't matter to me whether you want it in there or not. My only issue is that we take advantage of the opportunity to look at some of the very interesting stuff that we find in the passage today in Koine. Specifically today, I want to focus on the things that people say in the story. So we're going to focus on the quotes from the crowd, from Jesus, from the woman, etc. So let's dig in and start with John chapter 7, verse 53 through chapter 8, verse 3, and this is from the ESV. They went each to his own house, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning he came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and placing her in the midst, and we'll pick up in the next verse in a moment. I do want to point out that the term scribes for John only appears twice in his gospel. Once in chapter 8 and then once this time here in chapter 8 and one other part. Other than that, he's not much of a use of the word scribes. Let's go on to verses 4 and 5. Now they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say?" There's so much here, so let's break it down. Look at the things that they say to him in Koine. Ready? Didaskale, teacher. Notice that they're going to challenge him on his interpretation of the law. So what better term to address him than teacher. He's seated in the temple complex, teaching crowds of people, and that's how they approach him. Didaskale, teacher, in the vocative. Then they go on to say, here we get the great stuff. Aute hegune, this woman, kateleptai, she was seized, ep autophoro moiku omene. She was seized in the very act of adultery. So this is someone that we would say in the modern context was caught red-handed, right? So, so in their own words, she was seized in the very act. So this is not something that was reported to them. This is not something that was part of the rumor mill. She was seized in the very act. Now, that's what they say, but let's look at what isn't said. What's not said? By whom? Who seized her? How did this happen? How did they stumble upon this occurrence at such a fortuitous moment and find themselves able to bring this living example to the temple court to press Jesus with this question? With whom? Adultery is not something that happens as a solo endeavor, generally speaking. So where's the guy? There's no mention of the guy other than the allusion that she was caught in the very act of adultery. There's silence on the specifics because the specifics aren't as important to the crowd that brings the woman to see Jesus as the fact that she was caught in the very act of adultery. Let's look at the next thing that they say. Ende to nomo, and in the law, hemin, to us, Moses, enetelato, commanded. So in the law, Moses commanded to us, tas toiautes, such women, lithadzane, to stone. So we caught this woman in the very act of adultery, or this woman was seized in the very act of adultery. And in the law, to us, Moses commanded such women to stone. We're supposed to stone such women as this, who are caught in the very act of adultery. So they're very clear about what's supposed to happen, but it's even more clear if we look at the word order in Koine. So remember, in word order, because it's an inflected language with cases, numbers, genders, tenses, voices, moods, we don't have to have the words in a specific order to communicate, and we can use the order of the words to emphasize what's more important. Let's look at the way the writer of this passage structures the statement that is made to Jesus in regard to the law. First thing in the word order, in the law. What's the most important thing? The law. Why? Because we're testing a teacher of the law. Jesus, teacher. This woman was caught in the very act of adultery. Now, let's see what this teacher has to say about this. In the law, to us, so we're instructed by the law. How did that happen? By Moses. Moses instructed us in the law that such women as this to stone. The last thing, the least important part is the stoning. That's the last word in the clause. So to stone. So the second least important thing is women such as this. The third most important thing is the lawgiver, Moses. The fourth most important thing, I'm working my way down, so I guess the next most important thing is to us, the instruction that comes to us via Moses in the law, Torah. We've got the law that was given to Moses, and it instructs us that women such as this are to be stoned. Being stoned is not a fun thing like it is in the modern context. Being stoned results in death. It's not just punitive. It's not like we're going to hit you with a couple of rocks and then you'll go home and think about the thing you've done. Stoning is capital punishment. So let me ask you this. Does the Old Testament command, as they say, that women are to be stoned for adultery? Women such as this? Or does it say people caught in adultery are to be stoned? Well, that's a great question. To be fair, the phrase, the term they use, tas toi autas, is feminine. And so they're saying women such as this. But to be fair, the example that they brought to Jesus is a woman. So grammatically, it's appropriate that it's a feminine thing. But we also know the reality is the law condemns adulterers, not just adulterous women. And when they showed up, even though they caught her in the very act, they showed up sans fellow. They didn't bring the guy. Is that a sexist thing? Is that a patriarchy thing? Is that a hateful thing? Was he just better at grabbing his stuff and getting out of there? Did they not know who he is? Did they pursue him? We don't know. The story doesn't tell us. But anyway, let's get back to it. And here's the last thing that they say to Jesus after laying out the scenario. Part 1, this woman was caught in the very act of adultery. Part 2, in the law, Moses commands us to stone such women. Part 3, suun ti leges. You, therefore, what do you say? So in other words, we've got two things. We've got the reality of the situation. We've got the commandments of Moses in the law to us about how to deal with such a situation. But now, you, then, what do you say? We want to know if you are going to agree or disagree with Moses and Torah. When confronted with the real situation, we're not talking theoretics, we're not talking hypotheticals, we're not talking high-minded ideals. We've got a living, breathing example standing in the midst of the crowd at the temple court. What do you say should be done in light of what Moses commanded us, didn't suggest, didn't recommend, commanded us to do in the law regarding such women? Let's go on to verses 6 and 7. This they said to him that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground, literally in the dirt. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." Let's look at what he said in Koine. Ho anamartetos humon, protos, ep autein balato lithon. So, ho anamartetos, the one without sin, the sinless one, humon, of you. So you came here as a group. I'm talking to the group, but my concern, Jesus' concern in the story, is not with the group, but with the one who is a part of the group who has no sin. The sinless one of you. The next word, protos, first. Okay, so we're going to take that one person out of the group and elevate that person to the head of the line. Protos, first. Apautein, at her. Balato, let him cast. Lithon, a stone. Just like to stone was the last word in their sentence, lithon, stone, is the last word in Jesus' sentence. The concern isn't with the stoning, and even the next bit of concern is allowing the stone to be cast. Then it's at her. She's just gaining importance. Then it's the priority, who goes first out of the group. Then ultimately, the most important question is the one in the group who doesn't have red hands. So the sinless one of your group, first at her, let him throw a stone. See how important the word order is to sort of prioritize what he's saying. They came concerned about her obvious, caught in the act, red-handed sin. They came with a concern about the law as given by Moses and its prescription for dealing with such sin. And then he turns around and says, let's prioritize the sin in your group. the first person to throw a stone at her should be the person who has no sin in your group. The sinless one of you is the first to address her sin. The one with clean hands, we have a doctrine in the law in the United States called the doctrine of clean hands. Before you come to court looking for help, you have to make sure that your own hands are clean. You can't come to court and say, that guy sold me tainted cocaine. Because buying and selling cocaine is illegal. Your hands are dirty. You can't come and look for help with your dirty hands. So that's what Jesus says to them. Yes, you caught her red-handed. The person with clean hands in your group, he can take that clean hand and pick up a stone and let that guy be the first one to throw a stone at the red-handed woman. Let's go on to verses 8 through 11. And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground, but when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones. And Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more." Most of that is very straightforward. I just want to look at the last part, where after he says go, he then says sin no more. Let's take a look at that. Apo to noon, from now on, mekete, no longer, and then there's an imperative, hamartane, continually, present imperative, continually sin. So therefore, go, from now on, no longer keep sinning. Notice that the sinning's at the end, at the most important part for the word order is from now on, right? So he's saying there's been a turning point in what's happened here today. You were brought to a place where you should have expected to die, because in fact, Moses in the law commanded them to stone such women as this. So this was supposed to be the end of the line for her. And now he says to her, but from now on, having had this magnificent turn, with them, with light dawning on Marblehead, with them hearing his words, with them seeing whatever it was he was writing in the dirt, they, from oldest to youngest, beginning with the older ones, they recognized that their hands, in fact, were not clean, and they wandered away. And so he says to her, in light of this incredible thing that's just happened here, from now on, no longer live the way you used to live. You've got a second chance. You came caught red-handed. You were brought here caught red-handed. But now you have an opportunity to go and live a life with clean hands. Pretty awesome. Pretty magnificent. What did he write in the dirt? We don't know. The writer makes a very specific point of saying that he did it with his finger. Is this an allusion back to God writing the Ten Commandments on tablets of stone with his own finger? Maybe, but we don't know. It doesn't say. What is it about the older people hearing what he said and seeing what he did and leaving before the younger people? The older people have a better perspective, more self-awareness of the lives they've lived, hopefully. What about the law and the commandments? I mean, Moses did command them, the law commands them via Moses to stone adulterers to death. But yet, this woman goes away stoned. Did Jesus contradict the law? No, he didn't. He didn't. He did not say, you shouldn't stone such a woman. He just said, make sure when you reach for the rock, your hands are clean. Right? There's so much to wrestle with in this story. There's so much interesting stuff, great stuff for you to go and think about. So take a look in your English Bible, in several English Bibles. Take a look in your Greek Bible, if you have one, and see how it footnotes this story. How do they address the fact that it doesn't show up till the 5th century? With so much meat on the bone, with so much interesting stuff in the story, should it be there? Should it not be there? I don't know. It's not for me to decide. It's probably not for you to decide either, but it's great stuff to wrestle with, and I hope you enjoy your wrestling. Until we see each other again, Karis Kai Reine Humin, grace and peace to you.